They wanted me to disappear quietly. They wanted me to feel like I was lucky just to be tolerated. I know that sounds harsh. But when I look back at everything, every holiday dinner where my opinions were talked over, every birthday where my mother-in-law found a way to mention how my sister-in-law had done something better, every family group chat where my name appeared only when someone needed a favor, I can't dress it up any other way. That was the truth of it. My name is Jolene. I'm 32 years old and I live in Calgary, Alberta. I work as a project coordinator for a mid-sized infrastructure firm downtown. I am not flashy, I don't wear design or anything. I drive a 7-year-old Subaru that has a crack in the passenger side mirror I keep meaning to fix. I bring homemade butter tarts to potlucks because my grandmother taught me the recipe and I am genuinely proud of them. I am, by most accounts, an ordinary person living an ordinary life, which is exactly why they thought they could get away with it. My husband's name is Miles. We met at a mutual friend's cabin weekend up near Sylvan Lake the summer I turned 28. He was quiet at first. Not unfriendly, just the kind of person who watches a room before he decides to enter it. I liked that about him immediately. We talked for 4 hours straight on the dock that first night, about everything and nothing, and by the time the mosquitoes drove us inside, I already knew something was different about him. What I did not know, what Miles deliberately kept quiet, not out of deception but out of genuine exhaustion with how people treated him once they found out, was that Miles came from money. Not comfortable money. Not my parents have a cottage money. Generational, institutional, board of directors money. His family had built one of the largest private logistics and supply chain companies in Western Canada, and Miles himself had quietly grown a separate technology venture over the past 6 years that was, at the time we got together, valued at just over $3 billion. He told me on our 8th date. We were eating pho at a hole-in-the-wall place on 17th Avenue, and he just said it plainly, the way you'd tell someone you had a nut allergy. He said he'd learned to wait because he needed to know that the person sitting across from him was there for him, not for what his last name could open. I told him I genuinely didn't care. He laughed and said he knew, and that was exactly why he was telling me. I want to be honest with you. I did not fully understand what that number meant. Not really, not in a tangible daily way. Miles lived in a tasteful but not extravagant condo in Beltline. He cooked his own meals, he took the train to the office most mornings. The money was real, but it was not the decorating principle of his life, which is part of why I loved him. We got engaged after 2 years of dating. He proposed at the same cabin on Sylvan Lake where we met, at the same dock, at the exact spot where we'd sat that first night. It was October and the lake was still and gray and cold, and I cried so hard my face hurt. And then I made the mistake of telling his family. I say mistake not because I regret it. I say it because I walked into that dinner, a Sunday roast at his parents' house in Elbow Park, believing that sharing good news with people was a universally joyful thing. I was wrong. His mother looked at the ring first. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at his father with an expression I had seen on her face before. The one that means she is cataloging a disappointment but choosing to address it later privately, where she has more leverage. Well, she said. Congratulations, that was it. No hug, no tears, no reaching across the table. Just well, congratulations, the way you might congratulate a child for tying their shoes correctly. His older brother, who I will call my brother-in-law because that is what he was to me and it is the only name he deserves in this story, shook Miles' hand and then looked at me and said, "Big step. You two have only been together, what, 2 years?" "Almost exactly 2 years," I said. "Right," he nodded slowly, like this was concerning medical information. His wife, my sister-in-law, smiled at me from across the table. She had the kind of smile that lives entirely on the mouth and never reaches the eyes. She said, "That's so sweet. Did you know I actually have a friend from university who works in project management too? She just got promoted to VP. Very impressive woman." I said that sounded wonderful. She said she graduated from Queen's. "Did you go to university?" I said yes, Mount Royal, business administration. She said, "Oh, of course yes," and turned back to her plate. That was the tone of my entire relationship with his family for the next year. Every conversation a gentle series of reminders that I was less. Every compliment a backhanded introduction to someone better. Every family gathering a masterclass in exclusion, performed with perfect deniability. I want you to understand something. I am not a person who bruises easily. I grew up in a single-parent household in Red Deer, with a mother who worked 2 jobs and still made sure I never missed a school field trip. I have been told no by people with more authority than my mother-in-law, and I have survived every single time. But there is a particular kind of cruelty in being made to feel small by people who are supposed to become your family. It wears on you in ways that are hard to explain because it is never one big thing. It is 1,000 small things, a seating arrangement, a story told at your expense. A nickname, Little Jolene, his mother started calling me at some point, always with that fixed smile. That sounds affectionate but isn't. Miles saw it. He was not oblivious. We talked about it many times, and he tried to address it with his family, and each time they responded with variations of "we were just joking and she seems so sensitive and we're only trying to get to know her." He was caught in the impossible position of loving both his family and his partner, and I tried not to make it harder than it already was. But I was tired. Quietly, consistently tired. Then we started planning the wedding. I had always imagined something small. My mother's backyard in Red Deer, which she has spent 20 years turning into a garden that genuinely belongs in a magazine. Heritage roses along the fence, a stone path she and I laid ourselves one summer, string lights she drapes along the pergola every July. My mother is one of the most quietly impressive people I have ever known, and I wanted her home to be part of the most important day of mine. Miles loved the idea immediately. He said it felt like us, real honest, no performance required. His family did not agree. His mother called me 3 days after we announced the plan. She said she had assumed, given the family's position, that we would be looking at the Fairmont or the Hotel Arts at minimum. She said a backyard wedding in Red Deer, and she said Red Deer the way some people say economy class, would not be appropriate. She said people had expectations. I asked whose expectations. She said the families, their circle, the people who would be invited. I said that Miles and I had agreed on what we wanted. She said, "Jolene, sweetheart, you have to understand that there are things about navigating this family's social world that you're still learning." I said, "Thank you for the call," and got off the phone and sat very still in my kitchen for about 10 minutes. I called Miles. He was furious. He told his mother clearly that the wedding would be at my mother's home, and that was the end of the discussion. She appeared to accept this. She was very gracious about it on the surface. And then the comments started. Not to us directly, to other people, in conversations that made their way back to us through the usual channels. His aunt mentioned to a cousin that she'd heard the wedding was going to be very casual. His brother made a comment at golf about Miles doing things differently. His sister-in-law texted a friend, a mutual friend, which is how I found out, saying she'd had to buy a new garden party dress because apparently they were having a backyard barbecue wedding and she didn't want to be overdressed. I saved every one of those messages. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I needed to know what I was actually dealing with, because when you're in the middle of that kind of thing, it is very easy to convince yourself you're imagining it. 3 weeks before the wedding, his mother called Miles and said she thought it would be more comfortable for everyone if the wedding was moved to a venue. She had already made preliminary inquiries. She had a date in mind. She was very calm and organized about it, which is how I knew she'd been planning this for a while. Miles told her no. She said she worried the setting wouldn't photograph well. He said that wasn't her concern. She said she was only trying to help. He said he knew the week before the wedding his brother texted him, "Is it too late to change the venue?" Honestly, man, a backyard? People are going to talk. Miles showed me the text. I read it twice. I handed his phone back to him and I said, "Let them." My mother's backyard in July is something I will never be able to fully describe. She had outdone herself. The roses were in full bloom, a deep blush pink that she'd cultivated for 6 years from a cutting her own mother had given her. The pergola was draped in gauzy white fabric and fairy lights. My aunt, who is a florist in Lacombe, had done the table arrangements in wildflowers and eucalyptus. The whole thing looked like something you'd see on a wedding blog, except it was real and it was ours. 63 people were in that backyard. Every single one of them was someone Miles or I genuinely loved and wanted there. His family showed up with the energy of people attending something under protest. His mother wore a hat, an actual garden party hat, oversized, which I suspect was meant as a statement. His sister-in-law wore heels that immediately sank into the lawn. His brother stood near the back, with his arms crossed and his sunglasses on, looking like a man at a school play he hadn't wanted to attend. The ceremony was at 4 in the afternoon. My best friend from university read a poem by Mary Oliver. Miles cried during his vows, which made me cry, which made my mother cry, which made my aunt cry, which started a chain reaction across about a third of the guests. It was imperfect and warm and completely, utterly ours. And then, at 5:15 as we were moving into the reception, we heard it. A helicopter, not far away, close, getting closer. My mother looked up, my aunt looked up. 63 people in a backyard in Red Deer looked up as a private helicopter descended slowly toward the open field at the back of my mother's property, where Miles had, without telling me, made arrangements with the owner of the adjacent lot 3 months earlier. The pilot cut the engine. A man in a very good suit climbed out, and then another, and then a woman I recognized as the chief of staff from Miles' company, and they all walked across the grass, carrying what turned out to be a handwritten letter and a bottle of Dom Perignon. Because the board of directors of Miles' company had voted that afternoon to approve the largest deal in the company's history, a partnership that valued the company at north of $4 billion, and they had wanted to deliver the news in person. His mother stood very still, his sister-in-law's mouth was open, his brother had taken off his sunglasses. Miles held my hand and looked at me and smiled the way he smiles when he thinks something is quietly funny. He said, "Sorry, I knew they might do something like this. I didn't want to jinx it." I said, "It's fine, I kind of love it." I want to be clear, that was not a performance. Miles had not arranged it. He hadn't tipped off his family in advance. He hadn't orchestrated a reveal. He was genuinely surprised by the timing. The helicopter was just the board being the board, enthusiastic, dramatic, completely unable to read a room, and the timing was, frankly, extraordinary. But I will not pretend that I did not watch his mother's face very carefully in that moment. I will not pretend I didn't notice the way she rearranged her expression 3 times in about 4 seconds, running through surprise and calculation, and something that looked almost like embarrassment before settling on a fixed smile. My best friend materialized at my elbow and whispered, "Is that a helicopter at your wedding?" I said, "Yes," she said. "Okay." The reception went on. The board's representatives joined us for dinner. The Dom Perignon was opened and shared. Miles gave a speech that made everyone laugh and then made everyone cry again. My mother danced with my uncle until 11 o'clock. It was the best night of my life. His family left at 9:30. His family started the next morning. His mother texted Miles, "Darling, we're so happy for you both. We always knew Miles was destined for great things. Please tell Jolene we'd love to have you both for dinner soon." His brother texted, "Congrats, man. Serious question, is Jolene involved in the company at all? I have some ideas I'd love to run by her." His sister-in-law sent me a direct message for the first time in 14 months of knowing each other. She said, Jolene, what a beautiful wedding. Honestly so charming. I told everyone it was exactly right for you two. Can we do lunch?" I read all 3 of them on my phone while Miles was in the shower, and I was sitting on the bed in the hotel in Banff where we were starting our honeymoon. I put the phone down. I sat with those messages for a while. I thought about the hat. I thought about little Jolene. I thought about Red Deer said in that tone. I thought about the sister-in-law's friend from Queens who was such an impressive woman. I thought about the golf course comment and the preliminary venue inquiries and 3 weeks of whispered conversations that found their way back to me. I picked the phone back up. I typed 3 words to his brother, "Thanks so much." I typed 4 words to his sister-in-law, "That's so kind, thanks." I typed a longer message to his mother, because she deserved a longer message. I said thank you for coming, I was glad the day had been meaningful, and I looked forward to navigating our relationship with honesty going forward. Then I deleted it and wrote, "Thank you for being there, because some truths are better lived than argued." And then I put the phones in the nightstand drawer, face down, and I didn't look at it again until the afternoon. Because I was on my honeymoon. Because my husband was in the shower humming something I couldn't identify, and the mountains outside the window were turning gold in the morning light, and the coffee I'd ordered from room service was still hot. Because I had spent a year of my life being measured against a standard I never agreed to, and I had come out of it married to my best friend in front of every person I loved, in a garden my mother built with her own hands. They wanted me to be embarrassed by that. They wanted me to feel like we'd settled for less. Standing in that backyard with rose petals on the ground and Miles' hand in mine and a helicopter, an actual helicopter, parked in the adjacent field as a completely accidental monument to a life his family had underestimated, I felt many things. Embarrassed was not one of them. His brother did eventually come to Miles with his business ideas. Miles listened politely and said he'd think about it. That was 8 months ago. He's still thinking about it. His mother calls more often now. The calls are warmer. She uses my actual name. I am genuinely cordial with her because I am not interested in holding grudges, and because Miles loves her, and because the best revenge I have ever found is not anger but simple, quiet, unbothered happiness. His sister-in-law and I have had lunch once. She was perfectly pleasant. I was perfectly pleasant. We do not pretend to be close. That is fine. What I know now, what I wish someone had told me in the early days when I was driving home from those Sunday dinners feeling smaller than I went in, is this. You do not have to earn your place in a room you were invited into. You do not have to prove yourself to people whose approval you never needed. The life you are quietly building is enough. It is more than enough. It is worth the wait.